in that
Right.
medium of density, water.
Okay, but the above the air is also rubber. There's no water touching the air. It's only rubber touching the air. So what makes the whole system of air and rubber be recognized by the water and by the buoyant force to say, we have an equilibrium of pressure pushing up here? How does it even know about the air inside if there is nothing? See, we understand it as a force pulling down on everything, the rubber, the air, and the water. So then we say, okay, we take the amount of pressure that's being used, basically pulling down on the ball. That's a combination of all the forces pulling down on the rubber, all the forces pulling down on the air, combining that into a unit of area that it's being pulled down into. Then it takes and says, okay, for this to be supported, we have to have a pushing up from water that's more dense, more of a force pulling down on it. So they take the volume of the object that's submerging, which includes the air on the inside, and then they take a volume of the water that's being supported by the volume underneath. Now, if the volume underneath is not able to support it, like it's not dense enough, it doesn't have enough of its own pressure to push outward, then what's going to happen is that ball will continue to sink until the force pushing up from the pressure from the water being squeezed together, okay, is equal to the force pulling down on the ball by gravity. Now, there is no other way to explain this. If you, as long as it's a contained system, if gravity doesn't exist, then the air on the inside plays no role. The only time the air on the inside plays any role is when you say there's a force pulling down on that air as well as the force pulling down on the water. Otherwise, it's just rubber and water, and rubber's more dense than water. It should sink to the bottom.
I think you're just really overcomplicating a simple phenomenon that density and buoyancy easily explains this without any sort of force having to be imagined up. No downward
What's
pulling
pulling
force,
on
no
the air?
upward pushing force.
How does the air
What's
know
what?
which way is up? How does the air know which way is up inside of the contained system?
It's just by its very nature because of its lack of density.
That doesn't
It's
explain anything.
medium that it's therefore in water. Like if you held it deep underwater, it's just going to go straight up, but it's not going to keep going straight up until once it hits the
Okay,
surface.
all
It
right, all
might
right, all right.
bounce a
I have a
bit,
good question for you,
and it's
boss.
water. That's its natural
I
place
have
where it wants to be according to the laws of density and buoyancy.
okay, I have a good question for you, okay? So let's say we have a density column. Are you aware of what a density column is?
Yes, I'm well aware of
Okay.
these density
Let,
columns.
let's say we have a density column and the density column is in opposite order where we're saying this is a starting condition now, okay? We're going to say that the bottom is least dense and the top is more dense. Now we're not in motion, we're just holding this density column up and we say go. What happens? Go ahead. But tell me what happens.
Well, everything sinks to its level according to its amount of
Okay.
density in
Good job.
relation to
Good job.
other
Why?
things.
But why? But okay. Okay. Great. 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 In relation to the other things,
Displacement
correct?
theory.
You just said exactly what I wanted you to say. Now that everything's sitting down into our starting position, but in the opposite order, now that you have the density on the bottom and the less dense, or the more dense on the bottom, less dense on top, why do things not all of a sudden change direction? When you
What do
had
you
your
mean? Why
starting
would they change?
position before, because hey, you just said that it's a reversal of densities. This is that more dense is on top, less dense is on bottom. They just change because of their relative densities. Now that you have the more dense on the bottom and the less dense on the top, why do they not change again because of their relative densities? Why are they always changing in the direction of the Earth?
Because the more dense thing, basically, to put it in a nutshell, displaces the less dense thing. And the first law of, I'm not even sure what you call it, Newton's first law of whatever, says an object at rest remains at rest unless acted upon by another force. So unless you disturb it, that's where they're going to stay. That's why they've rearranged themselves according to the natural laws of density and buoyancy, and
Okay.
they've got no reason to change once they've
As
become a place of rest.
as per what you just said, what is the force putting things into motion when we have our starting condition and I say, okay, go? I tell you to go, and now we have everything sitting at rest. What is it that makes them go from rest to non-rest to motion?
Well, to be honest, I don't know how you got them that way in the first place. You pretty much have to do it on the spot. I mean, you can't just have them at the wrong order
Sure.
naturally and then
Yeah,
say,
yeah, yeah. Sure. No.
So you
I
have
completely understand. But what you could do is you could have nozzles that spray in air all at one time with the more thick air at the top and the least thick air at the bottom, and they will even themselves out, no matter what. Now, okay,
yeah, that's right.
let's skip that. Yeah, because of gravity. They're if you take away gravity, they have no reason to say, "Hey, we're thicker than you down there. We're supposed to be down there and you're supposed to be up here." Without gravity to tell them to be able to let them compare to each other, then there's nothing. It's just a matter of mass sitting in one area,
There's
not being affected by a force and being stuck in that one area.
there's the density of each, the properties of each different matter, each
Okay.
different medium. Their densities are
So,
what decide. It's not any imaginary force pulling them down. It's just the fact that their
okay.
own weight displaces the lighter ones and pushes them above them, and that's how everything gets sorted. There's no need to invent invisible forces that somehow
Okay.
don't then apply on large scales to other
So
things.
So let's take this back to my second point, because my second point obviously refutes this position you hold. When an object's in free fall, there is no force telling it which way to align. We know this. Let me ask you first: do you accept the fact that when things are in a gravity or when things are in a density column and they go into free fall, they become weightless and there is no organization between densities? Can you at least agree with that first? There's observational proof of this, so we need to make sure that we agree
That,
about this first.
so you say something
Basic,
becomes weightless.
yeah, okay. So if you have a gravity column, you're familiar with the vomit comet, correct? The
Yeah,
that does the hyperbolic flights. Okay. So when they go and they begin their free fall, they have video of showing a density column. Okay. So when they're not in
yeah.
free fall, the density column is organized most dense at the bottom to least dense at the top. When they go into their free fall, there is no organization. It loses all organization whatsoever. It's not the bottom at the bottom, because think about this, okay? When you drive in a car and you feel yourself pull backwards, when you feel yourself pull backwards from the acceleration, all right, if you were to have a helium balloon in there, the balloon will go forward because the air in front of the balloon is being pulled backwards with a greater force, and the helium balloon goes forward. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so
But
when
if
in
we
free
want
fall,
to,
okay, give me a second, Ross, give me a second. When in free fall, should we not feel the same force aligning the densities the same way we do in a car when we drive forward and have acceleration? When we're in free fall, should we not have the alignment in the opposite direction? Should the most dense not be at the top, because that's the way things are being pulled, and it's being pulled harder on the more dense objects? This is buoyancy. I mean, I'm trying to agree with you at this point. Would you not say that that's the way it's supposed to happen?
I can see where you're coming from, but I think that you're also misunderstanding the very fact that a thing in free fall is not at a place of buoyancy. When we're talking about buoyancy, it's
What
because
does
it's
that
recent.
mean? What does that mean?
Use it at buoyancy. So when you've got these objects in free fall, they're all falling at the same rate. It's only when they come to rest that they'll then be able to sort themselves out according to their density. And until they've come to
That's right.
rest, there's no reason to sort themselves out any
That's
other way because they're all in free fall at the same speed.
Hey, Flat Earth Jesus, may I correct you on one thing? Okay, if you're in free fall, and let's say we're in a box, okay, and we have our back on the top of the box and we go into free fall, that means that the box is moving at the same speed you're moving, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you don't feel any kind of organization. Now, if that box were to speed up, it would push you in the back and you would feel the inertial force pushing you backwards into the top of the box. Do you agree with that?
Yeah,
That's
if the
basically
box
like
sped
the
up. But
car. If
yeah,
a car was, yeah, if the box sped up, exactly. So if the box were to speed up faster than or were to accelerate faster than 9.8 meters per second squared, you would feel a force pushing you up. That is because you have you have the 9.8 meters per second pulling you down, and the equal and opposite reaction, which is more than 9.8 meters per second, pushing you back up. That gives the densities a buoyant, an alignment vector, a force vector to align themselves. So if you were to take anything and accelerate it faster than the speed of gravity, it would start pulling the heavier objects upwards and not downwards. This is observational fact.
it's a hypothetical if, because we've already established that they're all moving at free fall speed, and something
No,
isn't
no, no.
going to
That was
therefore
the
going to accelerate
example. That was the that was the
because
first example. That
hypothetical.
I'm just saying. Okay, that was the first example. I'm just saying in a second example, if you were to speed up that box that's in free fall, you would then give yourself an alignment. This is the same thing as talking about the helium balloon moving forward in the car, because when you accelerate, you create an opposite and equal reaction, an opposite and equal force pulling in the opposite and equal direction. That's going to then pull harder on the more dense atmosphere than it is on the helium balloon. This is why the helium balloon goes forward even though you're accelerating. You accelerate faster, the helium balloon goes forward even more until you accelerate so fast that the helium balloon is 90 degrees perpendicular to the force of gravity. So when you're falling in free fall, if you add that accelerating force, you will then create a force vector for the densities to align. The heavier densities will be pulled harder than the lighter densities. And in this situation, in free fall, if you were to, let's say, have a helium balloon in there that was in the middle of it, if you were to begin accelerating downwards, that helium balloon would then begin accelerating downwards faster than the rest of the air, because the rest of the air is actually accelerating. Yeah.
We've got like 15 seconds left of the section. Can we let him answer that before time runs out?
Go ahead, Ross. I'm sorry.
You're saying this hypothetical if, which has no bearing in reality. So you sort of debunk yourself automatically while you say if you apply acceleration. And this so-called helium, we stuck to the roof of the free fall plane or the back of the free fall plane anyway, because it's always wanting to rise above the air that's within it. So yeah, there's the whole idea of being anti-gravity on this whole idea of free fall plane is also complete and utter nonsense. It's just an illusion created by the fact that the sides of the plane are falling at the same speed as you're falling to give you this sensation of being in an anti-gravity environment. But in fact, you're all just falling, including the things in your density column, which will not be effective unless you actually pull your density column downwards. Maybe if you apply that force as you're dropping.
Okay, you get it. That's a good job. Hey, that's exactly what I'm talking about there, Jesus, or Ross. I'll call you Jesus. Okay, Jesus, check it out. When you push that, let's say you're in free fall and you take that gravity column and you shove it down faster, you then create the upward force. That's the acceleration that I'm talking about. That's opposite and equal. So now you have the 9.8 meters that is going in one direction, the natural force of gravity pulling down. You then have the added acceleration of whatever you just added to the gravity column to get it to sink inside of the free fall. And that in itself will provide a force for all the buoyancy to line itself up, talking about the denser objects that have more force applied to them will be at the top, which is in closer to that separation of direction of forces. And the lower densities will be at the bottom. This is observational.
Let's
let
Ross answer that. Hold on. Let Ross answer this. We're going to end this whole section, and then we'll hand it back over to Craig. So go ahead,
in
Ross.
Such an instance, that completely verifies the whole concept of density and buoyancy. And the fact is, you're only going to be able to hold your arm up about this high to say down by your side, the length of your arm. It's the most amount of time you're going to be able to apply that little bit of force of acceleration to it anyway. So it's not really going to be enough time for them to completely sort themselves out the way you would expect. But yeah, in that slight little window of opportunity, you may prove exactly what I say about density and buoyancy, and it's got nothing to do with gravity. So, you're sort of answering my questions for me with less proving that it is just density and buoyancy are the only forces being applied and dropping at free fall speed.
Can I ask you one question? Why then, in that situation, okay, because this is not a hypothetical. This is actually, there are maneuvers that in airplanes that cause you to travel to accelerate faster than the speed of or than the acceleration of gravity. And when that occurs, you do feel like you're being pulled back in your seat. Okay, so this is not just hypothetical. But let me ask you, when you do accelerate something towards the ground, why is it that you don't feel the acceleration that you're doing? Let's say you have something that's in free fall and you take it and you push down harder on it. Let's say you push down 1 meter per second squared with more acceleration. Okay, you add 1 meter per second squared acceleration to the object you're pulling down. Why is it that you're not feeling 10.8 meters per second acceleration force? The force when you apply it to the mass. Why are you not feeling that force pulling up? Why are you feeling only 1 meter per second squared pulling up?
I'm not really sure where you're going with this. Are you talking